Doering joins the show. Familiar guest for those of you who've rocked with us for a few years. But if you don't know who he is, somehow it's kind of hard because he's on TV everywhere. But this man once caught passes for the Florida Gators from a guy named Danny Werfel. Was part of 3 SEC championship teams for the Florida Gators. Made it a few years in the NFL as well. So we've got a legitimate NFL wide receiver to talk about the Florida Gators roster with us. Of course, a former Gator. Chris, welcome back to the All Kinds of Weather Forecast.
Yeah, I feel like this has become an annual event for us here, man. It's good to be back with you, and hopefully our predictions about Florida's success will be a little more accurate maybe than what it was last year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's were inaccurate last year. It wasn't just you. We were all kind of off the ball there. But yeah, I got to start by talking about something that everyone's talking about because we like to jump right into things just to get people's ears on the right stuff. So that for audience retention purposes, got to start with the uniforms because everyone's talking about them right now. Gators unveiled a couple new combos. They've got the blue helmets on the orange jerseys. Are going all blue from head to toe. They've got a new retro look where they're not new because I guess they've had the jerseys before, but they used to wear them 40, 50 years ago, but they have the white look now, the blue helmets, the white on white, but the retro look at home for South Carolina. And then they've got, of course, the blue helmet with the modern design, but then white on white. So what is your feeling about all this? How do you think that this is going to look when the lights are on and just how do you feel from the player?
Well, Neil, I'm one of the traditionalists as it relates to our home unis. I love the blue jerseys with the white pants and orange helmets, but I do like the retro. I was with Coach Spurrier and Shane Matthews yesterday. We were talking a little bit about the uniforms that Florida will wear against South Carolina, and it's actually more reminiscent of his junior year in 1965. But he said that Florida wore all whites for the home games back then, which is kind of crazy. But the cool thing about it, they made LSU have to wear the purple when they came to Gainesville. So I do like the retro look. I love the jump man on the old school kind of design there. Not a fan of the blue jerseys and what is it? Is it the blue jerseys and orange pants or the orange jerseys and blue
it's
pants?
The blue helmets and the orange jerseys with white.
Yeah, I
pants.
don't like that. I'm not a fan of that as much. So I understand wanting to change it up, but the orange jerseys are not reminiscent of the best years that we had in Florida football history by any means.
For sure. And then how do you feel about the blue out from head to toe?
I like the blue. I can get down with the blue as a change up, but I understand the opportunity to sell merch and getting players excited. But I do think you don't see Alabama or Texas out there doing a bunch of different crazy things, and I think our traditional uniforms are pretty widely respected throughout college football.
No, you don't see Alabama or Texas, although you do see Oregon doing it, and I'd argue over the past 2-3 seasons they've been more successful than both those schools, or at the very least as successful. So, well, let's talk some ball. That's why you're here. And let's start by setting the stage. Florida obviously had a lot of talent last year. They don't beat Texas and knock them out of the CFP without that talent. And we also know that Jon Sumrall agreed with that assessment that I just made because the first thing he did here was retain those guys. Yeah. And these were guys he didn't even recruit. To me, that says, for the most part, that's a really good omen that for as long as Sumrall's here, we can expect to, for the most part, keep our top players. We're not going to have a Trevor Etienne, a Caleb Douglas, a Princely Amon-Mielen, an Antoine Powell-Ryland, then fan favorite Jack Pyburn, the Scooby Williams, Jaden Hill, Chris McCallum. We're not going to have those types of players get poached. So to me, that says a lot about the way that Summerall wanted to make an entrance into Florida, but also says something about what we can expect long term. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the clip of Coach Golden talking to the football team the other day where he talks about the way they recruit is going out and get guys that want to be Florida Gators. I think what you're seeing with the guys that have stayed around and guys that have come in through the portal and the high school classes are guys that want to be Florida Gators. So to your point, like in a day where, so much coming and going takes place with the transient nature of the transfer portal, it's not all about money. And I think there's something to be said for understanding the opportunity that exists. When you have legacy guys like Vernell Brown and Miles Graham and Ben Hanks Jr., like these guys understand what it means to be a Gator. They can speak to it. I love the construction of the staff where you bring in Bam Hardman and Phil Troutwine that can talk about it from a firsthand perspective. I played for Dwayne Dixon as my receiver coach, obviously for Coach Spurrier, who could speak about what it means to be a Gator and the passion that goes along with it. So I do think there's going to be, a little bit more loyalty going forward, and that starts with how you initially build your roster. But I also think that there's some real authenticity about Coach Summerall that comes through, whether you and I are talking to him or whether he's talking to a group of players that he didn't recruit. Everybody that was in that room that day talked about how, wow, players sat up straight. They understood this dude's a little different, and he can speak the language a little bit better than some other coaches can. And going back to what you said, there's a lot of talent that was to retain. Jaden Baugh, Vernell Brown, Dallas Wilson, Miles Graham, Jaden Woods, Jaden Robinson. Like, there's a lot of guys that decided to come back, which is awesome. But it's also a bit of an indictment that you had all that talent and could only win 4 games last year. So I do think some of the problems, that were there last year need to be addressed. That's getting the right quarterback. We can talk more about some of the position groups, but I do think there's a lot to build on, and I like what the Florida staff did to sprinkle in some transfer portal guys too.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the quarterback position for sure. We have to, but I want to start with the fact that you personally have spent a lot of time with Jon Sumrall. There was the show on SEC Network that I think a lot of people enjoyed. That's all great. Cameras are on him. He puts on a great show, I'm sure. Then there's the authenticity side that you say. He's like that off camera. Obviously, He's like that off camera because he goes to Jaden Baugh's house, says the story, and he retains him. So clearly he's the same guy off camera too. So that's all great. But to you, what has jumped out the most aside from the authenticity? Because I think we all agree on that.
I love, something that people have described him as a guy who, the temperature rises in the room when he walks in, and he's got a level of intensity about him. And that dates back to his playing days. I also have great respect for guys that coach at a level that they actually played at. This guy played at Kentucky, played in the SEC, understands what it's like to not only coach in this conference after having been at a couple different stops like Kentucky and Ole Miss from the coaching perspective, but he was out there doing it on the field and can speak to how competitive this league is and the grind that going through an SEC schedule takes and the toll that it takes on you. So I just think that this is a guy that's a perfect fit. I think it's so ironic, how quickly things changed, where everybody was on that Black Friday upset when Florida pivoted from Lane Kiffin to immediately seeing him on that Sunday press conference introduction and like, wow, this guy's got a little something to him. And to his credit, Neil, he's done every single interview, every single podcast, every single appearance, has pressed the flesh with all the Gator folks to the point where, I think people understand who he is. And you're right, off camera, he is the same exact guy, because I've had a chance to hang with him in a lot of different situations, and nothing changes when the lights come on.
Yeah, so I actually met Summerall in Tampa for the NCAA tournament. We won't talk about how that went, but He was the exact same guy off camera. He was, and I watched too as he sat and he talked with every single Gator fan who came to say hi to him for as long as they could, well into the start of the second half. Granted, Prairie View A&M was not really much of a match for Florida, but nonetheless, he was talking to Florida fans as opposed to sitting down and enjoying the time with his family, which I know he wanted to do. But I have never doubted the authenticity. I also don't doubt anything that you said about how the temperature rises, and I also don't doubt that he's going to be the type of coach that means what he says in pressers. Like when he said the other day, I'm not going to be the guy to break down to build up, but I am going to be the guy to push the guys to the edge. Yeah, I believe that. I totally believe that. And I like him. I genuinely do like Jon Sumrall. I also really liked our last 4 hires as well. They were all, of course, very, very different, but they all came off as likable. And there was something, too, that we talked about a couple shows ago where anyone's going to be liked in their honeymoon phase because they're new and they're different from the last guy. So, for example, Napier was hired to recruit at Florida. The narrative around Dan Mullen was he didn't care for recruiting. Now, there were things about that I question. It's not quite that simple. But the long story short is that was the narrative. And then Mullen was hired because, the last guy, Jim McElwain, was kind of a weird fit. Nussmeier, the OC, wasn't great. Well, Mullen's going to fix that with his offensive play calling. And then McElwain, of course, is the offensive guy. Will Muschamp can put the offense together. You can get a defense, but he can't get the offense together. So all those coaches seem to be what their predecessors failed in. And Summerall seems like a combination of all their best traits. It almost feels to me like it's too good to be true. So I got to ask you as the realist on the SEC Network, what's the catch here? Because it does seem too good to be true.
I don't know what the catch is. And I love, all the people that initially compared the resume of Coach Napier with Coach Summerall, and even though they had similar stops along the way, very different in who they are. And I think that's one thing that stood out to Gator fans. One of the biggest complaints about Coach Napier was there was never any emotion on the sideline. Whether it was good or bad, you couldn't really tell. You'll tell with Coach Sumrall. He's got an authentic energy about him too. I've seen him at practice. He gets after the players, which I love. I played for a guy that was not afraid to coach you hard. I think that's an important part of developing and holding players accountable. So I think Coach Sumrall will do that. But let's take it another step forward in terms of the comparison. I thought, the staff that Coach Summerall's put together, I mentioned Troutwine and Hardman, you have the Gator flavor. But, with Buster Faulkner, you've got a guy that's coached in the SEC back at Georgia a few years ago. Brad White's been at Kentucky for a long time, understands this conference. I think all the different complementary personalities and resumes and pieces that he put together is great. But another thing is actually delegating to those folks, trusting them. I thought Coach Napier tried to do way too much to the point that, he was his own biggest enemy in a lot of ways. So that's the one thing you won't see from Coach Sumrall. He has hired a tremendous staff, including the strength and conditioning staff, and he just delegates and lets them go coach and do their things, and he manages those coaches.
Yeah, Rusty Witt definitely did some things this offseason. Well, we can definitely see some of the fruits. All right, let's talk personnel, because obviously you are what the sum of your players makes you too. So quarterback position, obviously DJ Lagway departs. So go the reports. He looks a lot better at Baylor, which of course that's how the reports are going to go. But Florida now has two guys, neither of which are quite as highly hyped as Lagway. But I think it's a classic story of high floor versus high ceiling with Philo and with Tremel Jones, respectively. I tend to think that Jon Sumrall kind of let some subliminal messaging kind of slip through in his Monday press conference. But I'll just ask you, who do you think wins the job? And then also by when do they win the job?
Let's go back and talk about what you just said first and foremost. I don't think Florida needs a quarterback that's going to go out and win you the game. They just can't have a quarterback that's going to lose you the game, right? So you want a guy with all that talent around you at the skill positions that can get you to the line of scrimmage, that can eliminate the pre-snap penalties, that understands where to go with the football based upon what the defense is presenting. This offense that Buster Faulkner has is very tempo oriented, a lot of unbalanced, a lot of eye candy things that present a strain to a defense. So you got to have a quarterback that understands how to utilize that, communicate that, and get it executed well on the field. Obviously, I think Philo probably has the leg up right now because of his experience in the offense dating back to his days at Georgia Tech. I do think the competition has narrowed considerably from where it was in the spring, and that's a credit to what Tremel's been able to do. Tremel does bring another element, with the run game ability and what he can do there. But, at the end of the day, neither of these guys have played very much. You can say what you want about the experience of Philo. It's a very small sample size of in-game production. So I think this is going to go into the season. Why would you not play them both against FAU and against Campbell? It may not be what the players or the fans want to hear, but I think those guys will both play well in the game, and then you're going to have to make a big choice before you go to Auburn in week 3.
I will answer your question rhetorically and say and I'm not sure how I feel about this. I don't know. I tend to go kind of sit on the fence on this, but the answer rhetorically to what you just said would be something along the lines of, well, you need to have a quarterback go into Auburn, Alabama with 2 games under his belt. So it's not, oh my God, wow, this is Auburn at night, big environment. I'm spooked out of my cleats because, I've already played 2 games. I've gotten the experience. I've gotten all those reps, not just in the games, but also 2 full weeks of practice with the ones, so I can feel a little bit better about myself going into this big game. Because Auburn, that's a game that Florida could lose, and that's where the things could start happening that hurt Florida as it comes to what Jon Sumrall said. I want to win in year 1. We're not trying to have a transition year. No, we want to be in the CFP year 1. That's the kind of game that can hurt Florida's chances to do that. So if you want to be in that position, you need to go and you need to win that game at Auburn. That would be the argument for why you pick one sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think you let it go on if there's a clear-cut winner in that competition. So, maybe I'll take a step back. But I don't think either of those guys has never necessarily separated themselves at this point. We got another scrimmage coming up on Saturday that will go a long way. And then, you kind of get ready for game prep mode after that when camp breaks. But I do think that you're going to see a lot of each of those guys. And I agree with you. I think that Auburn game is massive. I think it's not only massive for Florida, I think it's massive for Auburn, who's in a very similar situation with a first-year coach in Alex Golish, a team that lost 6 one-possession games last year. If the break goes here or there, they could be in a much different situation. But I love their defense. I love the fact that they retained DJ Durkin. You bring Brian Brown and 5 of his receivers over. You bring the center over. There's a lot of continuity there. So it's going to be an excellent test for Florida. And I think that 3-game stretch of Auburn, Ole Miss, and Missouri is going to go a long way in determining the type of season Florida can have.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about that in a moment too. But on the note of scrimmage, you went to Gainesville. We specifically talked off air, and we both agreed it was going to be best to push this conversation until after you saw the Gators scrimmage. So scrimmage notes are kind of few and far between. Hard to get our hands on anything really reliable. What did you see when you were in Gainesville for that scrimmage?
Yeah, it's so tough, man, when you're playing against your own team, right? I think I go back to, again, what Buster Faulkner does offensively. It's really challenging for a defense, but a defense that gets to see it every single day. It was frustrating for us, back in Florida when I was there with Coach Spurrier. They knew every one of our checks on defense. They knew, our route combinations. They knew the strengths of each of the players. So, I think this is going to be one of those things where it may not look the smoothest offensively against Florida's defense, but you get into a game against an opponent that hasn't seen it, where you're using tempo, you're using some of those shifts and motions, you're using the unbalance, and you're going fast. It's gonna be a lot easier on Saturday than it is right now for the fans, or excuse me, for the players on the offensive side of the ball. I think there's good and some bad, some mistakes. It was the first scrimmage of the fall camp. I'm anxious to see another week of that. I'll be in town this weekend and get a chance to go out there on Saturday night. So kind of excited to see what they can build on from that week 1 performance in the first scrimmage last week.
Yeah, it is said that the biggest jumps in improvement come from week 1 to week 2 during the season. Is that also true in your experience in terms of scrimmages in the preseason?
I do. I think it is true, and I love the fact that they're doing it at night. The first game, first couple games are going to be, all 3 of them, I think, are at night. So, you're practicing at a time where you're getting your body, in a similar situation to what they'll face playing at that time of evening. You're under the lights. It kind of even further amps up the excitement around, putting the uniform on and going into the stadium. So I do think there'll be a lot of improvement, but that's what you want. You got to replicate game action as much as you possibly can in these scrimmages, because you don't get an opportunity to see a lot of these guys. I do think we'll go a long way in determining the quarterback battle based upon how they play on Saturday night in the scrimmage.
So let's talk about the overall Florida roster, because we know the quarterback position is going to be something that's debated on and off here and there, but there's going to be a lot of talent helping them out on offense. We can start with the offense before we go to the defense. This receiver room is loaded. We know that there's a lot of talent there. It's also the position you happen to play. So I guess the question has to be, what does Florida's quarterback, whoever it is, have to do in order to let a Dallas Wilson, a Vernell Brown, a Micah Mays step up and shine the way that we know, or Eric Singleton, just too many names to name.
Yeah.
What does a quarterback have to do for those guys to just go off?
I'm glad you mentioned Eric Singleton, because I think he was one of the biggest acquisitions in the offseason for any SEC team. I thought he was really underutilized at Auburn last year. You go back to 2 years ago when he was with Georgia Tech, and the staff put up massive numbers. He's a get-it-to guy. Not only do you throw the football to him, you hand it to him. You find ways to get him in space. So I love what he brings to this offense. We know what Dallas Wilson, when he's healthy, is able to do. We saw it against Texas with his, physical prowess. Vernell Brown's kind of the steady guy there. Micah Mays is a guy that I don't know that a lot of people really know about. Was at Wake Forest and comes over through the transfer portal. Bailey Stockton, another guy that everybody's kind of talking about in camp with what he's done in transitioning from Georgia Tech and knowing this offense as well. So there's an embarrassment of riches. It's probably the deepest and most talented group on the Florida roster. But to your point, it's like, all right, let's get everybody lined up and let's make sure that we get the motions right. Let's make sure we have our eyes in the right place as a quarterback, and where the defense dictates the ball's going, we got to throw it on time and accurately. And that's what we did at Florida. Like the Shane Matthews to Terry Dean and Danny Warfel. Like it wasn't like, hey, I'm throwing to my best receiver, or I like this matchup. It's about, all right, here's the play call. Here's what I've been coached from what I'm looking at from a defensive standpoint. I'm just going where the defense dictates, and I'm going to throw it on time and throw it accurately and not put the ball in harm's way. And that's what we need, whether it's Philo or Jones. That's what the receivers at Florida need to be able to shine, as you mentioned.
I feel like it's very simple. We just need intelligence from the quarterback. We need good decision making. It feels like Jon Sumrall will take the less talented, the less perfect deep ball thrower in exchange for an upgrade in terms of decision making, quick thinking, just because you can have a check down route that turns into an 80-yard touchdown if the guy weaves his way through the defense. It's not that unforeseen to think that Eric Singleton can do that. I mean, you've seen it.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the running backs now too, because that's another position that is dependent on other teammates. Of course, the offensive line. You're going to need that. But Jaden Baugh is someone that obviously, starting with the fact he was tampered with. It was unsuccessful, but there were teams that messed with him and tried to get him, and he came back, obviously, because he wanted to be a Gator. It's pretty much assumed he's going to be the bell cow for Florida, but there's also other talent in that running back room. I like Evan Pryor. I like Montgomery. How do you think that those three guys are going to have their carries divvied up?
Another guy that everybody's talking about is Duke Clark as well. I mean, he's had a really good camp. I know he was nicked up a little bit here recently, but yeah, where I mentioned, Florida's receiving depth and talent, maybe the best group. I would say this is maybe 1B at the running back spot. And it does present an interesting dynamic. Like I thought Jaden Baugh last year, when we finally got to see him touch the ball as many times as he did against Florida State, reminded me of like an old school running back where he got better and better as the game went on, where the defense wanted less and less to tackle him. And that I'd like to see him be able to get a bunch of touches. I think he excels catching the football, so I think you'll see more of that out of the backfield as well. But it is a nice collection of really good talent that complements one another. Evan Pryor, as you mentioned, coming out of high school, highly recruited to Ohio State, didn't work out there, ends up at Cincinnati, comes over, and he understood the dynamic. He knew that Florida had Jaden Baugh and yet wanted to come anyway. I love a guy that embraces the challenge and wants to compete and do everything he can for his team. So I think that's what that room is made up of, is a lot of really good individuals that aren't necessarily concerned about their own statistics and want to do the best they can to provide some value in whatever way they can.
So I know that offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner very much adapts to what's around him. And I love that about him. I love a guy who's able to be fluid with what kind of offensive philosophy he has. Let's assume, unless you can tell me differently, but let's just assume that all things being equal, the offensive line is fairly congruent in terms of how good it is at pass pro and run blocking. Unless you tell me that they're much better at one than the other, let's assume that they're equal. With that said, with what we talked about, with the quarterback situation being what it is, with Jaden Baugh being what he is, and the receivers being what they are, what kind of balance do you think we're going to see between runs and passes with this offense?
Yeah. Oh, man, I think you probably end up seeing a pretty 50-50 split, honestly. I think, again, going back to, what he's done in the past, you see a lot of run success in Faulkner's offense. So I like the fact, if I had to, it's funny going back to Florida when I was there. Everybody thought of us as the airing it out, running the fun and gun, but we actually, if you look, I want to say we were maybe 51% pass, 49% run, and I think you'll see a pretty similar balance from these guys this year. You mentioned the offensive line, like say what you want about quarterback, I think that is less of a factor in the success that Florida has this year than the offensive line is. And right now you're rotating about 9 or 10 guys in, trying to figure out what the best combination of 5 is. That could be another one of those things where you see a lot of different guys playing in week 1 and week 2 to try to figure out, what the combination is before you go to Auburn. Love the Harrison Moore acquisition at center. I think they feel good about the guard positions, but playing tackle in the SEC is hard, and I think it's even harder right now trying to figure out who those guys are. So that to me is the biggest key for whether this team is able to win 9 games or only wins 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, the margins for that are so thin. We saw that a year ago. Florida was in a lot of games for a while, and then they just kind of fell apart at the end. But I mean, to your point about what the Gators were running and passing during your time there, people tend to forget, but Florida had their all-time leading rusher play along with you for a couple of years.
Yeah,
Eric, the
yeah.
the king of Florida rushing for a career. So there was reason to run the ball there, and there's reason to run the ball here, for lack of a better way to put that. Let's talk about the defense right now, because we know that the offense has the pieces to be explosive. The defense certainly has a lot to like. The linebacker room, one of the best in the country for sure. The other, I mean, I like the defensive line. I think that there are some questions in the secondary. What do you make of this overall defense, and what's your key for them to be successful?
Yeah, I think I think it's going to be a situation much like you talked about, where the coaches are very confident in the front seven, and then they feel good about maybe some of the starters in the secondary. But after that, the depth is a bit of a question. I will start at the most positive. This is the best linebacking core in the entire conference, maybe in the entire country. It was criminal that Miles Graham was not on the first team, second team, or third team media preseason All SEC team. He's an amazing, not only productive player, but leader for that team. I'm excited to see what that group with Aaron Childs and Jaden Robinson looks like. They've developed some depth as well. And then up front, I think it's going to be a much more disruptive group, along with the scheme as well. I don't know that what Florida was doing in the last couple of years with their defensive line, schematically, moving those guys sideline to sideline instead of north and south, was the best utilization. So I'm excited to see what Jaden Woods is able to do. We've seen how big he's gotten, and the numbers that we've seen posted. LJ McCray, I think, turns out to live up to the hype this year. But when you get into the secondary, I feel good about Ben Hanks Jr. is probably going to be the starter at one of the corners. Kermani McLean, we have moments of him looking great, and then others where he gets beat. I think part of the problem is he's always been the best athlete on the field, and now he's at a point where the talent level is so high you can't just depend on your athleticism. So we need some better fundamentals from him in both eye discipline and what he's doing with footwork. Safety could maybe be the biggest question mark. I think you feel good about starters there, but like that to me, I'd rather, if I had to have some thin groups and some question marks, I'd rather have it in the secondary and be able to make up for it with your front seven and pass rush than vice versa.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's definitely there's something to be said for having a tremendous game wrecking ability with guys like I'll never pronounce his last name unless I'm told it, but from Jacksonville State, Emmanuel Odebayo.
They call him E-Man. Let's just stick with E-Man.
E-Man?
E-Man's
Okay.
going to be the man.
I like that, because I know, watching his tape from Jacksonville State, that guy is different. Like, there are some athletes you just watch, he's an issue. But yeah, so between him and then of course the linebackers, Aaron Childs, Miles Graham, I mean, there's so much talent in that front seven. What do you make, before we go on to the last topic? What do you make of the one-on-one, the much ballyhooed mano-a-mano contest between Dallas Wilson and Ben Hanks Jr., where they're counting reps against each other, and whoever wins the most reps by the end of the fall wins the competition? How did that look in person when you saw that?
I love it, man. I love competing with your corners. As I talked about before, like you get to know these guys so well because you go up against them all the time. But one of the best things about it, and most beneficial, I think, is the information that gets shared. Yeah, you're going to compete. And when I was playing for Washington, we had Champ Bailey, Fred Smoot, and Darrell Green. So every day in practice, you're going up against the best. It made Sundays a lot easier. But, I think that's kind of what you're experiencing here. And the benefit is like, all right, why'd you do this? What'd you see from me? What'd I tip on my double move here? From a leverage standpoint, like the information that gets shared when you're going up against somebody like that is very beneficial too. So I think, promoting that competition and the fact that these guys are so dialed in on wanting to make sure that they're charting every single rep against each other, I think that speaks to the competitiveness in that locker room as a whole.
Do you know what the winner will get as a prize?
I don't. I haven't even heard of that. You're the first that's actually made me aware of that. So I didn't know, but I'm going to keep my eye on it a little bit more.
Definitely keep your eye on that. Keep your eye out for that. I'd heard about that a couple weeks ago. Then Zach Abelverde of On3 did a pretty good piece on it. So yeah, check that out and make sure you keep your eye on that. Maybe ask and let us know what you hear, whatever the winner may get of that. Because that's definitely something to watch for. All right, let's talk about the schedule for the Gators because it's not easy, but it's definitely easier than it's been. There's no Miami, there's no LSU, there's no Texas A&M. There is Texas. Of course, there's Georgia. There's Oklahoma. There's a weird, sneaky kind of game against Missouri on the road. And then there's obviously Ole Miss comes back to the Swamp. And then, of course, Auburn to start all this off. I went in reverse order. But yeah, there are some good opponents on there, but it seems to set up more easily for Florida. On our State of the Program address show, which we do every year with a couple people I know you know well, Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered and Allie Peak, come back, and we all had Florida at either 8-4 or 9-3. Do you think that is a reasonable goal, or is that a reasonable expectation, and Florida could shoot for 10-2?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you win 4 games in the previous season and you're talking about doubling the win total, I think that's I would say more of a reasonable goal. I don't know that you can necessarily expect it, especially with a new coaching staff and some of the issues that we talked about at the offensive line spot. It's tough playing in the SEC, right? It's even tougher now because you're going to a 9-game conference schedule that you in addition to, you're going to play at least one other Power 4 opponent. So it really comes down to, it's not only who you play, it's where you play them and when you play them. And, I love the fact that Florida catches Ole Miss coming off that LSU game that we know is going to be tremendously emotional. Whether they win or lose, they're going to be drained. Coming into the Swamp, it reminds me of Texas coming in last year in that spot. So I like the fact that we catch them then. But yeah, I'm pulling the rest of the schedule up. The beginning of the season, I love the fact, especially with this new team and trying to figure things out, you get to kind of acclimate a little bit with FAU and Campbell. Auburn, going to Jordan-Hare is always very challenging, but it is a first-year coach there, so you catch them at the right time. Missouri on the back end of that Ole Miss game, I don't know what it is about Como, but it always seems like a tough place for Florida to go play. But I think as you look at that stretch, in addition to those 3 games, going to Texas and having Georgia to finish off the month of October, I think you got to be 3-2 in that stretch to really be able to feel good about getting on the cusp of that 9 wins that I think gets you into the college football playoff field this year. So I don't know how easy that'll be, but I think you have to kind of manage that 5-game stretch with at least 3 wins.
So which 5 games? Missouri, South Carolina, Texas.
No,
Georgia.
I'm sorry. Auburn, Ole Miss at home, at Missouri, South Carolina. Oh, I left out. I'm sorry. 6-game stretch there. I think you got to go. I think you got to win at least 3 of those 6 games to feel good about getting to potentially the 9-win mark.
Do you think that 9 wins might get an SEC team in the CFP?
It should. I mean, I thought a 9-3 Texas should have gotten in last year. 10-2 Vanderbilt should have certainly gotten in. But not all losses are not created equal. And the fact that the SEC is now playing 9 conference games, the media has to adjust, the fans have to adjust, and more importantly, the College Football Playoff Committee has to adjust to just how difficult this challenge is of playing in the SEC and the schedule that goes along with it. I do think that they'll make that adjustment. I do think we see our first 9-3 team get in this year, and I think it's from the SEC.
Who do you think it is?
I think there's going to be multiple 9-3 teams. I have Georgia and Ole Miss getting to the SEC championship game this year. I'm high on Texas A&M. I think A&M is a team that continues to ascend. I like what their talent accumulation has been. man, I think of teams that are taking a step back. I think Tennessee probably takes a little bit of step back. I'm not buying the LSU. I think LSU is more likely to go 8-4 than they are to go 10-2. So I'll have them on the outside. But yeah, I think Florida could be a 9-3 team this year. I think Alabama's kind of in that same conversation as well, 9-3 as well. So one of those teams, maybe Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida probably find their way to 9 wins this season and get into the playoff.
All right, Chris. Well, we know we're very appreciative of your time. We definitely want to let you get going. But before you do, we got to ask you one more question. The Florida Gators will reach the CFP if what happens? Blank. And it can be multiple things. It can be one thing. Just what? What is
I'm going to go back to the offensive line. I mean, if the offensive line finds a way to, I don't even think you have to make it a big plus. Just don't make it a negative. Let's put them in a category that they're not going to hurt you. They're going to find a way to minimize the penalties. They're going to minimize the sacks, because this is a scheme with what Buster Faulkner does. He can coach around that a little bit, using the tempo, using the unbalance, using some of the other things that they'll do with the eye candy. I think that they can help. He can help out the offensive line. So as long as it's not a negative, I think the offensive line coming together as just a neutral gives Florida a chance to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, just be a stalemate. Don't lose games. You don't have to win them. Just don't lose
That's right.
them. Well, Chris, we appreciate the annual time with us. So we definitely appreciate the willingness to come back every year and talk Gators with us. We look forward to hopefully having you back in maybe December. We can talk about a CFP run for Florida, hopefully. But until then, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, really it's great to be with you. Yeah, I mentioned before we started recording, I've had a chance to be in Columbus for the Tennessee-Ohio State game 2 years ago in the first round. Last year was in Oxford for Tulane Ole Miss. I can only imagine what it would be like in the swamp in December, getting a chance to host a playoff game. What the atmosphere would be. Hopefully, we get there this year. But if not, I'm 100% certain it's in the next couple of years.
Well, I mean, having been there for LSU in 18 and Auburn in 19, I don't know that it can be better than those, but it could certainly match those, because those were special environments. But just matching those would be good enough for me.
I'm with you, brother.
Chris, I appreciate your time, man. Let's I know. Oh, no. I have to ask one more question. I know you don't. Florida does not play LSU this year. Do you have a substitute bet with Peter Burns?
We don't have one yet. I was thinking about it the other day. We got to come up with something, because that's been a fan favorite over the last few years, and unfortunately, it's been me, receiving the brunt of that bet. But yeah, if you have any ideas, or any of your viewers have any ideas, would love to hear it, and something I could propose to PB to keep that going.
Well, I'm hearing through the grapevine that Florida will host LSU for a baseball series this year, so maybe the winner of that series can take their pick.
I've already lost one of those with the College World Series Finals a couple of years ago, where I had to go through the airport with the full LSU baseball uniform on. But yeah, I'd be willing to do it again. I'm always willing to bet on our Gators.
Wait, weren't you weren't an SEC Network in 2017?
2017, I was, yeah.
So why didn't you do a bet then when Florida beat LSU for the Natty?
In baseball, no, we didn't. That was the first time we did the baseball bet was. I don't even think. I'm trying to think of how many years we did the football bet. I think we've only done the football bet. It may have started in 2018, or so we may have not even gotten to that point yet. Which you're right. I wish we would have had it back then.
You should, yeah. That would have been fun. Well, you can tell them. Unlike LSU, we didn't need 3 games to beat you for the Natty, but that's not all we have. Chris, really appreciate your time, brother. Always appreciate your time.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Don't mind doing us a favor, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. All that stuff helps us bring Gator Nation more great Gators content. Thank you so much to Chris. People can obviously watch you on SEC Network, but where can they get more of your content on top of that?
Yeah, we got the SEC Network stuff. Be back with my boys up there on Friday, Saturday, and Monday, and on Sirius XM as well on the SEC channel 374. At Chris Doering on Twitter or X, and C Doering 28 on Instagram.
All right. You guys heard him. Go follow him. Go like his channel if he's got one. Go subscribe. Go do all that fun stuff for him as well as us. Really appreciate it. Until next time, y'all. Go Gators in all kinds of weather. We got football coming up in a couple of weeks. See you guys then. Go Gators.